A shoe. That's the first thing I remember. A brown leather shoe, 2 inches from my face, stepping around me like I was a crack in the pavement. Then another shoe, then voices above me, somewhere far away, like hearing people talk underwater. Is she dead? Don't touch her. Just keep walking. She smells. Somebody should call someone. Not my problem. I tried to open my eyes. The light was wrong. Too bright, too sharp, hitting from the wrong angle entirely. I was lying on something hard and cold. I looked down. Cardboard. I was lying on a piece of flattened cardboard on a sidewalk, and people were stepping over me, and I could not, for the life of me, remember how I got there. I sat up slowly. My hands were dirty. My clothes were wrong. A blazer that had once been expensive, now torn at the shoulder, stained in ways I couldn't identify. One shoe. Just one. I touched my face. I didn't know my face. Not the way you forget something. The way you look at a word you've written too many times and suddenly it doesn't look like a word anymore. I looked at my hands. I looked at the street around me, pedestrians streaming past, a coffee shop with fogged up windows, a newspaper stand with today's date. I read the date, and I felt nothing. No recognition, no anchor, no sense of where that date sat in the timeline of my life, because I didn't know what my life was. A woman stopped in front of me, 60s, bright red coat, grocery bags in both hands. She crouched down to my level, which nobody else had done, and looked me directly in the eyes. Honey, what's your name? I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. Not because I was afraid to answer, because I genuinely did not know. She reached into her bag and pressed a granola bar into my hand. It's okay, she said. You're okay. She walked away, and I sat on my piece of cardboard in the middle of a city I didn't recognize, and held that granola bar, and understood, in one slow, terrible wave, I had no idea who I was. No name, no address, no memory of yesterday or the day before, or any day before that. Just a blazer that had once been expensive, and the creeping, specific feeling that whoever I had been before this had been someone. Stay with me, because this is not a story about a woman who lost everything. This is a story about a woman who had everything taken from her, deliberately, systematically, by someone she trusted, and how she got every single piece of it back. Welcome back to Ravage Stories, where dark secrets get uncovered, shocking betrayals get exposed, and satisfying revenge always follows. If you're new here, hit subscribe and join the family. Let me know where you are listening from. It means more than you know. If you've ever felt like the world just decided to move on without you, this story is for you. Let's go. My name is Claire Weston. I know that now. But for a long time, longer than I like to think about, I didn't. So let me tell you who Claire Weston was before the cardboard and the dirty hands and the strangers stepping over her like she wasn't worth the detour. I built my first business at 24 with a laptop, a maxed out credit card, and a stubbornness that most people mistook for arrogance. By 31, I was running Weston Meridian Group, a mid-sized corporate consulting firm with 42 employees, 3 offices, and a client list that companies twice my size would have been proud to carry. I was not lucky. I was not handed anything. I worked the kind of hours that end marriages, and I was okay with that because the work was mine, and the company was mine, and every single thing I had built from nothing. My mother had died when I was 19. My father was gone before I could walk. The only family I had left was my uncle, Richard Weston, charming, successful in his own right, always at the holiday table with a bottle of good wine and a story about someone he knew in high places. He had been my mother's older brother. He had held my hand at her funeral. He had told me, I can still hear his voice saying it, "Your mother would be so proud of you, Claire. You know that, don't you?" I believed him. I believed everything about him. That was my only mistake, and it was a catastrophic one. The first sign that something was wrong came 14 months before the cardboard. I was in my office, corner office, 32nd floor, the one I had specifically chosen because you could see the whole city from it, and I wanted to be reminded every morning of exactly what I was working for. My CFO knocked on the door. Marcus Webb, methodical, quiet, the kind of man who double-checked everything twice and then checked it again. He came in and closed the door behind him. That alone told me something was wrong. Marcus never closed the door. He sat down across from me and placed a single sheet of paper on my desk. Claire, there's a discrepancy. What kind of discrepancy? The kind that shouldn't exist. He tapped the paper. This account, it's not one of ours, but it has our name on it. And in the last 6 months, $340,000 has moved through it. I looked at the account number. I had never seen it before. Pull everything, I said. Every transaction, every signature, every document attached to that account. I want it on my desk by morning. Marcus nodded, stood up, stopped at the door. Claire, whoever set this up knew our internal systems very well. He left. I sat at my desk, looking at the city and felt, for the first time in a long time, genuinely cold. Marcus had the files on my desk by 7 the next morning. I went through all of it. The account had been opened 11 months earlier. The signature on the opening documents was mine, or an almost perfect copy of mine, close enough that I had to look 3 times to find the places where it wasn't. The address on the account was my home address. The phone number was mine, but I had never opened that account, not once, not ever. I called Richard that evening. He answered on the 3rd ring. Claire, what a lovely surprise. Richard, I need to ask you something. Of course, anything. Have you had any contact with anyone at Weston Meridian? Any of my staff, my financial team, anyone? A pause. Just one beat too long. Why would I? That's your world, darling. I stay in my lane. Right, I said. Of course. I hung up, and I sat there with the file open in front of me and told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid. I just didn't know that yet. Over the next 3 months, the discrepancies multiplied. Not explosively, slowly, carefully, the way water finds cracks. A client contract that had been quietly renegotiated without my knowledge, with terms that disadvantaged us so significantly I couldn't understand how it had been approved. When I asked my legal team, they showed me the authorization, my signature, on a document I had never seen, a board resolution passed in a meeting I had allegedly attended, but hadn't. The minutes showed me present, voting in favor of a structural reorganization that shifted significant decision-making authority away from me. My signature, my vote, neither of them mine. I called an emergency meeting with Marcus. He closed the door again. Marcus, how long has this been happening? Based on what I can trace, 18 months, maybe longer. Someone is forging my signature, yes. Someone who has access to internal systems, board schedules, client contracts, and my personal information. Yes. Who? He was quiet for a moment. That's the part I can't figure out yet, because whoever is doing this, they're not just inside the company, Claire. They're inside your identity, bank records, credit files, even your personal address history. There are alterations I can't explain. I stared at him. Someone is rewriting who I am. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The night it all collapsed happened on a Wednesday. I was working late. I was always working late. When my access card stopped working, I tried it 3 times. Then I called security. The guard on the desk, a young man named Thomas, who had worked our building for 2 years and always greeted me by name, looked at his screen when I told him who I was. Then he looked at me, then back at the screen. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't have a Claire Weston listed as an authorized occupant. Thomas, it's me. You see me every morning. He looked genuinely uncomfortable. I understand that, ma'am, but my system shows the authorized director of Weston Meridian Group as a... He squinted at the screen. Richard Weston. And you're not on the approved access list. The floor moved under me. That's my uncle. He doesn't work here. He has never worked here. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step back from the desk. Thomas. Ma'am, please. I stepped back. I stood in the lobby of the building I had worked in for 9 years and looked at my reflection in the glass doors and felt the first genuine tremor of something I had no name for yet. I called Richard. No answer. I called Marcus. His number had been disconnected. I called my lawyer. Ms. Weston, I received communication from the board this morning that your directorship has been formally... My directorship can't be terminated without a shareholder vote, and I am the majority. The share register was updated last week. You currently hold 12%. That's impossible. I'm looking at the filing right now. I hung up. I stood outside my own building in the dark and understood. While I had been working, someone had been dismantling me. Not the company, me. My identity, my ownership, my existence on paper. And whoever had done it had been so thorough, so patient, so surgically precise, that the world no longer had a record of who I actually was. What happened next, I cannot account for precisely. I know I drove. I know I ended up at my apartment building, and my key didn't work, and the door code had been changed, and the front desk manager looked at me with an expression that told me my name was not in his system either. I know I sat in my car for a very long time. I know at some point I stopped sitting in my car. And I know that the next clear memory I have after that night is the brown leather shoe, 2 inches from my face, and the voice above me saying, "Is she dead?" What happened in between is something my doctors later told me has a name. dissociative fugue, the brain's emergency exit when reality becomes too catastrophic to process. You don't black out, you don't sleep, you simply stop. You keep moving, you keep existing, but the part of you that remembers, that anchors, that knows who you are and where you belong, goes somewhere else entirely and locks the door behind it. For 6 weeks, I was nobody. I ate at shelters when I found them. I slept where I could. I carried a blazer I didn't know the history of, and one shoe I couldn't explain. And every morning I woke up and tried to remember my name. And every morning, nothing came. The woman who found me was not a social worker. She was not a doctor or a counselor or anyone officially designated to help people like me. Her name was Dot, short for Dorothy, 71 years old, former school librarian, lived 3 blocks from where I had been sleeping, and walked the same route every morning for 20 years because she believed, as she told me later, that a person who doesn't look at their own city doesn't deserve to live in it. She had walked past me 3 days in a row before she stopped. On the 4th morning, she crouched down, looked me in the eyes, and said, "You're not from here, are you?" Not a question. "I don't know," I said. "What do you mean you don't know?" "I mean I don't know where I'm from. I don't know my name. I don't know anything before," I gestured at the cardboard. "This." She studied me for a long moment. Then she stood up and held out her hand. "Well, you can't stay here. Come on." I'm not asking. Come on." Dot's house was small and warm and smelled like old books and strong tea. She sat me at her kitchen table and fed me toast and didn't ask questions for the first hour. Then, when the color had come back into my face and my hands had stopped shaking, she sat down across from me. "You're educated," she said. "The way you talk, the way you hold yourself even now. I don't know what I am." "Your hands," she said. "Show me." I held them out. "Calluses on your right hand, not manual labor, writing, or a mouse. You're used to a desk, and that blazer, even destroyed, that's a good blazer. Custom stitching." I looked at my hands like they belonged to someone else. "You were somebody," she said simply, "and something happened to you." She pushed a notepad across the table. "Write down everything you remember, even if it feels like nothing. A color, a smell, a sound, a face, anything." I picked up the pen and I wrote the only thing that surfaced. The city from very high up. A window, morning light. Dot, read it. A high floor, corner office maybe. You worked in a tall building. She got up, started making more tea. "That's where we start." Over the next 2 weeks, Dot became the most important person in my life. She was methodical in a way that reminded me, though I didn't know why yet, of someone I had once known well. She researched missing persons reports matching my description. She photographed me and ran reverse image searches. She took me to a doctor she knew personally, who agreed to examine me off the record. He ran blood work, and then he sat across from me and said, "There are traces of a compound in your system that we don't see much anymore. It's a drug combination, sedatives and a dissociative agent. In large enough doses, repeated over time, it can cause significant gaps in autobiographical memory." I stared at him. "Someone drugged me? Someone drugged you consistently, over what I'd estimate as a period of weeks, possibly longer, to make me forget who I was." He didn't answer that directly, but he didn't look away either. On a Tuesday morning, 17 days after Dot found me, I was sitting at her kitchen table looking at a city map she had printed, trying to identify which part felt familiar, when something moved in the back of my mind. Not a memory exactly, more like the shadow of one. 32nd floor, corner office. You could see the whole city. I pressed my finger to a point on the map. "Downtown, financial district. Here," I said. Dot looked at where I was pointing. "Are you sure?" "No, but yes." She put her coat on. "Then that's where we're going." We stood across the street from a glass tower in the financial district. I looked up at it, and something inside me, something that had been locked behind a door for 6 weeks, moved. "I know this building," I said. "How do you know it?" I looked at the name on the facade, Meridian Tower. And then, like a key turning in a lock that had almost rusted shut, Weston Meridian Group, my company. My name came back to me not as a sound, but as a sensation. The weight of it, the feeling of signing it thousands of times on thousands of documents. Claire Weston. I grabbed Dot's arm. "My name is Claire Weston. I built that company. That building has my name in it." She looked at me steadily. "Then let's go find out what happened to you." What we found was worse than I had imagined. The company was still operating, under the name Weston Meridian Group, but the registered director, according to every public filing, every company's house record, every business registry we could find, was Richard Weston, my uncle, the man who had held my hand at my mother's funeral, who had told me she would be proud. I sat in Dot's kitchen that night and looked at the name on the screen and felt something I had not felt in 6 weeks. Not confusion, not fear, clarity, cold, absolute, irreversible clarity. It was him, I said. You're sure? Every forged document, every altered record, every piece of my identity that was rewritten, it all pointed to someone inside my life, someone who knew my systems, my signature, my clients, my board. I looked at the screen. He didn't just steal my company, he tried to erase me completely. The drugs, the fugue, all of it bought him time to finish the job while I disappeared. Dot was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "So what are you going to do?" I closed the laptop. "I'm going to prove who I am, and then I'm going to take back everything he stole." She nodded slowly. "Then you're going to need help." She reached into her kitchen drawer and placed a legal pad on the table in front of me. "Start writing." What I did next took 4 months. 4 months of rebuilding an identity from fragments when someone had spent 18 months dismantling it. Let me tell you how you prove you exist when every official record says you don't. You start with the things that can't be forged. The first was my doctor, Dr. Patricia Haynes. She had been my GP since I was 26. She had records going back 9 years. She recognized me the moment I walked into her office, and her face did something complicated. "Claire, my God, where have you been? It's a long story. I need you to verify my identity on record, officially. Whatever you can provide." "Of course. But Claire, are you all right? Are you safe?" "Not yet," I said, "but I'm working on it." The second was my former assistant. Priya had worked for me for 6 years. When I called her from Dot's landline, she didn't speak for almost 10 seconds. Then, "Claire, oh my God, Claire, we thought, there were rumors you had, nobody knew what. Priya, listen to me, I need your help. I need you to tell me everything that happened after I disappeared." She told me. Richard had moved into the company within 2 weeks of my disappearance. He had presented board documents showing a transfer of directorship signed by me. He had told the staff I had suffered a breakdown and voluntarily stepped back. Did anyone question it? A pause. Marcus did. He kept saying it didn't feel right. He was let go 3 weeks later, escorted out. "Do you know where Marcus is? I have his number. Claire, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to need you," I said. "Are you with me?" The pause this time was shorter. "Tell me what you need." Marcus Webb was living in a 1-bedroom apartment 40 minutes outside the city, doing freelance accounting work and, he told me later, waiting for exactly this phone call. When I knocked on his door and he opened it and saw my face, he grabbed the door frame. "Claire." "Hello, Marcus." He stepped back to let me in. His apartment had a folding table against one wall covered in files. I looked at them. "Are those?" "Everything I copied before they walked me out," he said. I knew something was wrong, and I knew one day I was going to need proof. I've been building this for 4 months. I looked at him. "How much do you have?" He picked up a file and handed it to me. "Enough to put him away. I just needed you to come back and sign the complaint." Over the next 6 weeks, the 4 of us worked. Me, Dot, Priya, Marcus. At Dot's kitchen table every evening, building what Marcus called the most comprehensive fraud case he had ever seen constructed outside a law firm. Let me tell you what we built. Medical records from Dr. Haynes confirming my identity going back 9 years. Priya's witness testimony detailing the timeline of my disappearance and Richard's takeover. Marcus's financial records showing the 18 months of account manipulation, forged signatures, and systematic transfer of ownership. Toxicology reports confirming I had been drugged over an extended period. CCTV footage from my apartment building showing Richard entering with a key during the weeks before my disappearance. Emails, which Marcus had archived, between Richard and a man we identified as a document forger, discussing the creation of transfer papers bearing my signature. And one final piece that Marcus found buried in a filing from 11 months earlier, a life insurance policy, taken out in my name, beneficiary Richard Weston, $2 million, payable on confirmation of death. I sat at Dot's kitchen table and looked at that document for a long time. He hadn't just wanted the company, he had wanted me gone permanently. The fugue, the drugs, the erasure of my identity, it was all designed to lead somewhere specific. A woman with no identity, no home, no memory, sleeping on cardboard, has a very short life expectancy. He had been counting on that. I called a lawyer. Not my old firm, they had been compromised. A woman named Vera Strand, who had a reputation for corporate fraud cases, and who, When I walked into her office and placed Marcus's files on her desk, looked at them for 20 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up. You have been the victim of one of the most sophisticated identity fraud operations I have seen in 20 years of practice. I know. This is going to be a significant case. I know that too. You understand that even with all of this, proving your identity legally, reclaiming your directorship, reversing the share transfers, it's going to be a fight. Ms. Strand, I leaned forward. I built a company from nothing with a maxed out credit card at 24. I survived 6 weeks on the street with no memory of my own name. I am not afraid of a fight. She looked at me for a moment. Then she opened a drawer and took out a client agreement, slid it across the desk. Then let's begin. The legal process took 3 months. 3 months of depositions and filings and identity verification hearings and moments where I sat in courtrooms and had to prove, document by document, that I was who I said I was. It was the most disorienting experience of my life, and I had spent 6 weeks not knowing my own name. Vera was extraordinary. She built the case the way Marcus had built his files, piece by piece, leaving nothing to interpretation, constructing a picture so clear that by the time we walked into the final hearing, the opposing legal team was already pale. But the moment I want to tell you about, the one that mattered most, was not in a courtroom. It was in a hotel lobby. I had asked to see Richard. Vera had advised against it. Claire, you don't need to. The case is solid. You don't owe him a confrontation. I know I don't need to, I said. I want to. He agreed to meet. Of course he did, because Richard had spent his entire life being the most confident person in any room, and he had no reason to believe this time was different. He was already seated when I arrived. Gray suit, good watch, that easy, practiced smile. He looked up and the smile stayed exactly in place. Claire, you look well, considering. I sat down across from him. Considering what? Everything you've been through? Say it plainly, Richard. Something shifted almost imperceptibly behind his eyes. You've had a difficult time, a breakdown. These things happen. There's no shame in it. Is that the story you're going with? It's what happened. I placed a single document on the table between us, the insurance policy. He looked at it. The smile didn't move, but something behind it did. Where did you get that? Does it matter? That's not 2 million, Richard. Beneficiary, you. Taken out 6 weeks before I disappeared. I leaned forward slightly. You drugged me. You forged my signature for 18 months. You systematically deleted my existence from every official record, and then you sent me out into the world with no memory of who I was and waited for the street to finish what you started. His jaw tightened. That's a remarkable fantasy. I have the toxicology reports. I have the CCTV of you entering my apartment. I have your emails to the forger. I have Marcus Webb, who copied 31 months of financial records before you walked him out of my building. I held his gaze. I have everything, Richard. Every piece. Silence. For the first time in my life, I watched Richard Weston have nothing to say. You held my hand at my mother's funeral, I said. You told me she would be proud of me. Still nothing. Was any of it real? Any of it at all? He looked at the table, and in that look, in that single moment of not answering, I had everything I needed. I stood up. The hearing is Thursday. Vera Strand will see you there. I walked out of that hotel lobby and didn't look back, not once. The hearing lasted 2 days. By the end of the first day, the share transfer reversals had been approved pending final confirmation. By the end of the second day, Richard's legal team had filed for a settlement discussion. Vera looked at me across the conference table during the break. They want to settle. No, I said. Claire, no settlement, no deal, no quiet resolution that lets him retire somewhere comfortable with whatever he managed to keep. She steadied me. Then we go to criminal charges. Yes, it'll take longer, I know. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the cardboard, the brown leather shoe, the voice saying, "Is she dead?" I thought about 6 weeks of waking up with no name. Yes, I said, I am completely prepared for that. Richard Weston was charged on 7 counts: identity fraud, corporate theft, forgery, conspiracy, administering a noxious substance, attempted insurance fraud, and one that Vera had found buried in an older statue that made the prosecutor's eyes light up when she raised it: attempted unlawful deprivation of a person's legal identity. He pleaded not guilty on all counts. The trial lasted 11 days. Marcus testified for 4 hours. Priya testified for 2. Dr. Haynes gave evidence about the toxicology. The document forger, who had been located in another city and offered a reduced charge in exchange for cooperation, testified about the emails, the payments, and the specific documents he had been commissioned to create. I testified last. I sat in that witness box and I told the whole story from the beginning. The discrepancies, the forged signatures, the night my access card stopped working, waking up on cardboard with no name, and I told it without crying. Not because I wasn't feeling it, because I had done my crying in Dot's kitchen at 2 in the morning and I had used it all up, and what was left was something cleaner and harder and completely unbreakable. The jury took 6 hours, guilty on all 7 counts. Richard Weston was sentenced to 14 years. The share register was restored. My directorship was reinstated. Weston Meridian Group, my company, the one I built from a maxed-out credit card at 24, had my name back on the door. I walked in on a Monday morning and took the elevator to the 32nd floor. The corner office was exactly as I remembered it. Somebody had been using it. Richard's things were still being cleared, but the window was the same. The view was the same. The whole city laid out below me, exactly where I had always needed it to be. I stood at that window for a long time. Then I sat down at the desk, and I got back to work. There are some things I want to tell you about the aftermath, because revenge stories usually end at the verdict, and I think that does a disservice to everything that comes after. Marcus came back. He walked into my office 2 weeks after the verdict and stood in the doorway looking slightly awkward. I wasn't sure if... "Sit down, Marcus," I said. "Your old desk is still yours if you want it." He sat down. "I kept those files for 4 months. I wasn't sure you were even..." "I know. I just knew something was wrong." "I know that too." I looked at him. "Thank you." He nodded, looked at his hands. "So, where do we start?" Priya brought coffee on her first morning back and put it on my desk exactly the way I liked it, without being asked. I looked up at her. She shrugged. "Some things you don't forget." And Dot, who crouched down on a pavement when everyone else stepped around me, who fed me toast and handed me a notepad and said that's where we start, who drove across the city with me to stand outside a glass tower because I pressed my finger to a map and said here. I asked her what I could do for her. She thought about it for a moment. "There's a shelter 3 blocks from where I found you," she said. "They're always short of funding." "Done," I said. And she added, "I wouldn't say no to dinner somewhere nice. I'm 71. I've earned it." I took her to the best restaurant in the city. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu and didn't apologize for it once. I loved her for that. People ask me what the hardest part was. Not the trial, not rebuilding the company, not even the 6 weeks on the street. The hardest part was the hotel lobby, sitting across from a man who had held my hand at my mother's funeral and watching him refuse to answer the only question that actually mattered. Was any of it real? He never answered. I've made my peace with that, because here is what I know, what those 6 weeks with no name, no history, no proof of my own existence taught me, is that identity is not a document. It's not a share register or a company filing or a signature on a page. It's the doctor who has known you for 9 years and recognizes you the moment you walk through the door. It's the assistant who still remembers how you take your coffee. It's the CFO who copies 31 months of records and waits 4 months in a 1-bedroom apartment because he knows in his bones that something is wrong and you are going to come back. It's the 71-year-old librarian who crouches down on a pavement when everyone else steps around you and says, "You're not from here, are you?" Richard spent 18 months rewriting my identity on paper. He could not rewrite the people who actually knew me. That was the one thing he never thought to take, and it was the only thing that mattered. If you are watching this and you feel like someone has spent a long time making you doubt who you are not crazy. If you feel like the ground has been moving under you and you can't find solid ground, look for the people who knew you before, the ones who remember. They are the proof that no one can forge. I want to ask you something before you go, because this story is mine, but the question belongs to everyone. If you woke up tomorrow with no memory of who you were, who would find you? Not officially, not on paper. Who would recognize you? Who would crouch down when everyone else kept walking? Who has been quietly copying the files, waiting for you to come back? Drop their name in the comments, or just the letter of their first name if you want to keep it private. Because I think we all have a Dot somewhere in our lives, and most of us have never told them what they mean to us. Tell them today, not tomorrow, today. And if this story hit you somewhere real, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you soon.